Can you imagine a world in which you are so brutally punished for passing so-called disinformation, as the liberal media now calls it, that you are virtually banned from participating in life? Where censorship no longer just means disappearance from your social media accounts, that you will become among the disappeared like so many, including our past president, Donald J. Trump. No, a total ban on participating in life, any form of digital life, where you don't just lose your social media account or find yourself in Facebook jail. You find yourself utterly unable to function, unable to email, unable to create a Word document, unable to even text an innocent photo to a friend or a neighbor. Ever seen one of those movies where someone ends up exiled from the tribe, sentenced to live alone in the woods forever? That's what I'm talking about. I'd like to tell you that this world is merely theoretical, but they're actually creating it. Microsoft announced it in a press release last week that only Breitbart tech writer Alon Bakari, also best-selling author of the book Deleted and former guest on this podcast, happened to catch. It's a terrifying press release, and the world it describes, no one's going to want to live in. It's a world in which if you get caught passing so-called disinformation, even just privately among a few friends, you can be exiled to the point where you'll no longer be able to hold a job. How would it work? Right now, if you spread so-called disinformation, which is usually anything that's not in approved Democrat National Committee talking points and thus regurgitated and repeated by the media, anything that conflicts with the official narrative, no matter how accurate or correct it later proves to be, is considered disinformation. You're probably used to by now the penalty for that. Temporary or maybe even permanent loss of your Facebook account, your Twitter account, whatever platform you spew or spread it from. But what if the penalty were much greater? What if, for instance, for the crime of suggesting, as a medical doctor, that hydroxychloroquine's use in curing COVID ought to be studied and it might have some potential, when the official line is the opposite? Well, normally right now the punishment for that is temporary bans to the loss of one's account, either Facebook or Twitter. What if they took it a step further, though? What if all digital content by you was banned from being uploaded or shared with anyone, anywhere, ever? That's exactly what Microsoft and other big tech companies are proposing. They've created something they announced in a press release last week called the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, and it is terrifying. It would destroy online privacy and anonymity completely. Here's how Alon Bakari describes it in his article. The purpose of the organization is to devise a system where all content on the internet can be traced back to its author. Take a photo, post it, everybody knows who created it. This would apply to videos, documents like Word documents, audio, images, texts, text messages like the kind you might send your mom, anything you could possibly want to create. And it would trace it back to its author from the moment of origin and creation. Privacy would simply not exist. What would this mean? In short, a ban from Facebook for disinformation would now be a total ban, an inability to operate for as long as they decide to exclude you. It is a terrifying amount of power, and it's exactly what the big tech companies are contemplating together. Signed on to this initiative are Microsoft, who's leading the pack. They operate Word, Paint, Notepad, Edge, and Office Suite. So if you create a doc or a JPEG or, use a Microsoft service, you're probably already involved in some capacity. Then there's Adobe, the company behind Photoshop, Illustrator, Acrobat, and Premiere Pro. And TruePic, a company you might not have heard of. They developed technology that tracks the creation of photos from the very moment they're created on a smartphone. Also involved, Intel, which dominates the market in laptop and desktop central processing units, or CPU. A CPU is responsible for processing virtually all information on your computer. So whether you're typing a sentence or taking a screenshot, it's the CPU that's processing the data. And Accessing the CPU, as they're planning to, is the ultimate form of digital surveillance. Because even if you're disconnected from the internet, you're not on Facebook or social media right now, the CPU still sees everything your computer does. See the problem there? Thinking about writing a memo on disinformation, spreading something considered to be a conspiracy, it knows. And you've not even published it yet. The plan is to attach signals. These signals would be attached to information at its creation to ensure it's censored and suppressed wherever it travels online, even if somebody else is sharing the information. Say you've been banned for misinformation and you're at the family reunion, and so you hand Uncle Jim your phone and say, "Hey, Jim, why don't you upload this picture of the family?" Nope, it was taken by your phone. Can't be uploaded to the internet. See how this works? That means anything created by a disinformer could be suppressed simply because of its point of origin. And of course, the signals could be used to identify the creators of dissident, because now we're talking about political dissidents here, dissident content. Wait until you hear, in Microsoft's own words, how they intend to use this technology in partnership with all those companies when we return in just a moment. So why on earth would all these big tech companies need the ability to identify from the point of creation and thus to block any uploading of digital data? Why would they need to know who created it? Well, they did the work for us. According to Microsoft's press release announcing the creation of the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, the coalition was created for just one purpose: to stop the spread of disinformation. We all know what that is. Again, that's anything that doesn't conform to whatever the liberal media is spewing that day. And that usually comes straight from the Democrat Party. As Alon Bakuri writes in his piece on this, disinformation, based on how the word is used today, might as well be called dissident information, like the kind Soviet dissidents used to pass around and then have to run from their government. According to Microsoft, again in their press release, the coalition was created for a single purpose: to stop the spread of disinformation. The coalition was established, they say, quote, to address the prevalence of disinformation, misinformation, and online content fraud through developing technical standards for certifying the source and history or provenance of media content, unquote. In other words, privacy stripped completely, but an ability also to ban folks from sharing things at the source of content. You spread disinformation 6 months ago? Oh, well, good luck sharing those photos of your family reunion or anything else online. Want to post your resume to LinkedIn? Good luck with that. Want to email your resume to a potential new employer? Again, good luck with that. Besides, your email was shut down. It was identified as belonging to you. Who is most threatened by the creation of dissident information? That is, information that challenges a media narrative that is so often wrong. And this is what's terrifying, folks. The media narratives, the big stories of the last 4 to 5 years politically, have almost all been either total lies or nearly completely dead wrong. The media wants the ability to continue to sling these unchallenged. So who proposed this coalition I've been telling you about? Well, the precursor to the coalition was a group called Project Origin. You'll never guess who was in on that. The New York Times, the BBC, CBC, and Radio Canada. Their mission statement says, misinformation is a growing threat to the integrity of the information ecosystem. Folks, this is astonishing. From the New York Times, which literally made up the homicide of the Capitol police officer and made up their sources and then had to retract the same thing. These people are going to be the ones who decide what misinformation is? Yep, that's the plan. Here's the rest of what they write as Project Origin when they're proposing this whole thing. Having a provable source of origin for media and knowing that it has not been tampered with en route will help to maintain confidence in news from trusted providers. Yeah? It'll also block supposed non-trusted providers from publishing at point of origin. It will never hit the internet. They'll be banned. Look, the goal here has been stated up front. The establishment media wants to trace the origin of all digital content so that only trusted providers, i.e. them, can publish. And ultimately, so that in the future, when they make up homicides, like claiming that Officer Brian Sicknick was killed by Trump supporters wielding a fire extinguisher who then, essentially beat him to death, that no one can challenge their narrative. It doesn't get to fall apart. They get to literally make up the truth with no challenge and no need to ever retract, as the New York Times did in the face of just unbelievable, overwhelming evidence that that story was fake. In other words, in the new digital world, there'll be nowhere to hide. And even the brazen behavior of Facebook, Twitter, Google over the last year, the election interference, the censorship of a president, the mass censorship of grassroots political movements, it pales in comparison to this. This is big tech's most dangerous plan yet. And folks, this is not just a plan. This is the announcement. They're already underway developing this. They're just letting us know it's coming. What would your life be like in a system like this? Remember, they're not merely proposing it. This press release by Microsoft announced they're already creating it together. I'll explain what daily life would be like in such a system coming up next after a brief break. So what would life in a system like this be like? Actually, the same culprit behind all of it, the New York Times, has already described it. Remember the article they published a few weeks ago suggesting that people not be allowed to use encryption? In other words, they wanted every text, every email that was sent to be monitored for misinformation. This is how hardcore the left is about controlling every last piece of information in the information flow. Specifically, the New York Times was freaking out about apps like Telegram, which allows you can just download the app and now your messages are private. You don't have to use, say, Android's Messenger app, which they scan and keep the information. Telegram, totally private.